చెక్ కలర్ చెక్ కలర్ గద్దె నేను
Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats now. We are about to begin the proceedings of this evening. The agenda for this evening is flashed on the screen for your convenience. We hope to have a very interesting, interactive session at the end of the speech by our guest lecturer, so please feel free to ask questions and actively participate in the event. The audience is also requested to rise on the arrival of the guest speaker to the hall as a mark of respect. Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, Member of the Parliament, India, guest speaker for the evening, Secretary to the Ministry of Defence and State Ministry to National Security and Disaster Management, General Kamal Gunaratne, WWV, RWP, RSP, USP, NDC, PSC, MPhil, Acting Deputy High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka, Mrs. Banu Prakash, Vice Chancellor General Sir John Kotalawala Defence University, Major General Milinda Peris, RWP, RSP, VSV, USP, NDC, PSC, MPhil, PGDM, Tri-Service Commanders, Officers of the Military and Police, Academics, other distinguished invitees. Good evening once again. On behalf of the Director General of Institute of National Security Studies, Professor Rohan Gunaratne, and the staff, I warmly welcome all of you. National security plays a pivotal role in the stability and prosperity of any nation. Special consideration must be provisioned to the emerging threats to national security through an array of novel avenues, including narco-terrorism, cybersecurity, climate, and energy crisis. The essentiality of cross-border cooperation, regional integration, and intelligence sharing have considerably risen in this 21st century. Today, the national security faces unprecedented challenges. Looking at this context, there is an urgent need to explore and expand on security strategies to prevent future threats and mitigate them. This security salon anticipates to scrutinize how to enhance our defense structure from where we are today to where we should be tomorrow. not only as Sri Lanka, but also as South Asia. The chair for today's event is General Kamal Gunaratne, WWV, RWP, RSP, USP, NDC, PSC, MPhil. General Kamal Gunaratne is an iconic leadership figure in Sri Lanka who was elevated to the 4-star general rank by His Excellency the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka on 28 December 2020. As a gallant military leader with a distinguished military career spanning over 35 years, holding many command, staff, and instructional appointments, and having almost 2 years of service as a government officer of Sri Lanka. General Gunaratne is currently holding secretary appointments in both Ministry of Defence and State Ministry, National Security and Disaster Management, 2 main administrative appointments in the government administrative system. Thereby, he acts as the principal defense policymaker and advisor on the national security-related matters. Further, to the colossal extent of vital responsibilities absorbed by General Gunaratne, he also holds the chairmanships of Presidential Task Force to build a secure country, disciplined, virtuous, and a lawful society, and for archaeological heritage management in the eastern province of Sri Lanka. Being a renowned senior military officer, the role played by him as a general officer commanding 53 Division during the final phase of humanitarian Operation Sri Lanka was highly admirable and has made contemporary records. He has also held prestigious Colonel of the Regiment of appointments of Mechanized Infantry Regiment, Special Forces Regiment, Gajava Regiment in the alternate timings, and has extended noteworthy service to all 3 regiments during these tenures. As a highly qualified personage, he possesses a master's degree in the field of arts and science of warfare and has also earned his highest military academic qualification from an esteemed military institution, National Defence College of India. He also possesses an MPhil in Defence and Strategic Studies from the University of Madras. He has also served in the diplomatic field as the deputy head of mission in Brazil. He is an author of innovative war literature for the first time in Sri Lanka history and has published 7 books to date, including the revolutionary war literary sensation in Sri Lanka, Road to Nandikadal. Dear sir, I now cordially invite you to the podium to deliver the welcome remarks.
Respected guest speaker, nominated Member of Parliament in Rajya Sabha of the Republic of India, Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, General Secretary, Virat Hindustan Sangam, Mr. Jagdish Shetty, Acting Deputy High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka, Ms. Banu Prakash, Commander of the Sri Lankan Navy, Vice Admiral Nishantha Ulugethanna, Commander of the Sri Lanka Air Force, Air Marshal Sudarshana Patirana, Director General of the Civil Security Department, Major General Ranjan Lamahewage, Vice Chancellor of General Sir John Kotalawala Defence University, Major General Milinda Piris, Director General of Institute of National Security Studies, Professor Rohan Gunaratne, all additional secretaries, Chief of National Intelligence, Director Generals, Commissioner Generals, Head of the Department of Business Research at the University of Moratuwa, Dr. Thesara Jayawardena, Coordinating Secretary to the Prime Minister, Mr. Geethanath Kasilingam, officials of the Foreign Ministry, all serving and retired senior officers of Tri-Services and Police, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. As the Secretary of Defence and the Secretary to the State Ministry of National Security and Disaster Management, I consider this as an immense privilege to conduct the welcome speech of this remarkable security salon, conducted with a world-recognized guest speaker who had always been with Sri Lanka at all times. He is nominated Member of Parliament in Rajya Sabha of the Republic of India, Dr. Subramaniam Swamy. Sir, on behalf of the Institute of National Security Studies and State Ministry of National Security and Disaster Management, and also the Ministry of Defence, let me have the honour to welcome you to the Ministry of Defence and to this Security Salon event in this glamorous evening. We are immensely proud on your distinguished presence here with us today to share your wealth of knowledge here at this event conducted by the Institute of National Security Studies. Sir, we as Sri Lankans truly appreciate the acceptance of our invitation extended to attend this event as a guest speaker amidst your busy schedule and pandemic restrictions during your brief visit to our beloved motherland, Sri Lanka. We are grateful to see such a great friendship towards Sri Lanka as you had always been maintaining throughout the past. We as Sri Lankans will never ever forget the support you extended towards us during the Elam War steered by the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Elam, the most ruthless terrorist organization ever existed in this world. We know how you backed our government during that crucial period where most countries stood against us. We, the Sri Lankans, never forget and will cherish the same forever. In continuation of your friendliness towards Sri Lanka, we remember your participation in the defense seminar conducted in year 2014, in which you brought a sparkling light to those discussions that became highly fruitful with your intellectual inputs. All the foreign and the local participants, including the senior officers of tri-services and police, highly appreciated the inputs given by you that broadened their horizons of knowledge. Sir, this event scheduled today, the Security Salon, is one of the significant events in the security studies calendar of our Institute of National Security Studies and the Ministry as well. It is a closed-door discussion conducted with a limited or selected audience held with the aim of generating a discussion on a timely, relevant topic of interest on international, regional and national security aspects. Our focus here is towards the security in the contemporary environment and future. Accordingly, we intend dwelling on a timely, pertinent theme today, which is national security in the 21st century. Sir, whilst praising your attendance once again, I sincerely hope that you will enjoy your stay with us in this wonderful evening. Thank you very much, and now the stage is open for you, sir.
Okay. Sir, may I request you to take your seat, please? Thank you. Okay. Come. Okay. I will start off. Is it okay? Yeah, it's okay. You sit down. Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, MP, our chief guest today, General Kamal Gunaratne, Secretary to the Ministry of Defence, State Ministry of National Security and Disaster Management, our chair, Acting Deputy High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka, Mrs. Banu Prakash, Vice Chancellor of General Sir John Kotalala Defence University, Major General Milinda Piris, officials from the Ministry of Defence, service commanders, military officers, academics, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to you. I am honoured and privileged to stand in front of such an august gathering and introduce the eminent speaker of today's Security Salon, Dr. Subramanian Swamy, on behalf of the Director General and the staff of the INSS. Born to a family of 4 in Chennai, in the state of Tamil Nadu, Dr. Subramanian Swamy has had his early education in New Delhi Public School and had read an honours degree in Bachelor of Arts by majoring in mathematics from the University of New Delhi in 1960. He has then achieved a Master's in Statistics from the Indian Statistical Institute in Kolkata, followed by a PhD in Economics from the Harvard University in 1964. He has then been elevated to the status of an associate professor in the same university and has served back to his country in the Indian Institute of Technology as a professor of mathematical economics and resigned on becoming a cabinet minister of Commerce, Law and Justice in 1990-1991. His political career dates far back to 1974 and has been elected as Member of Parliament many times. He has also held many prestigious appointments in the Indian government thereafter. Dr. Swamy is a distinguished personality, widely respected for his honesty and his crusade against corruption, class action and public interest litigation in Supreme Court of India. He is considered the leading figure in the successful struggle during 1975 to 77 period for the restoration of constitutional democracy in India. He has also taken the lead in promoting India-China, India-Israel and Indo-Sri Lanka normalization of bilateral relations. Today, he is a senior Indian politician, a nominated member of the Parliament in Rajya Sabha from the ruling BJP. Dr. Swamy is the author of several books, research papers and journals. He is also co-authored with Paul Samuelson a paper on the theory of index numbers. Dr. Swamy is no stranger to Sri Lanka, as the Secretary of Defence mentioned. With his renowned oratory skills, he has been invited many times and delivered candid and thought-provoking speeches in international conferences such as Defence Seminar. And before inviting Dr. Swamy to the podium, I wish to make a quote he made in one such seminar soon after the war ended. Let not the world dilute this victory over terrorism. Sri Lanka brought it to an end, while other parts of the world are making compromises. It is a historic landmark in the world history. Having said that, I kindly request Dr. Swamy to the podium to deliver his speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Gunaratne and Professor Gunaratna. There is one is A and one is E. Right? Our representative from India in the High Commission as Deputy High Commissioner, and this extremely distinguished audience. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak on a topic which is of great value in the years to come and of great significance for the years to come. Starting the year 2000, when we solved internationally, we means the globe, the Y2K problem. The Y2K problem was the year 2000, when the year 2000 had 2 zeros at the end. And all through earlier, the computers of the United States were using only the last 2 digits for dates. And so 1998 was only represented by the 2 figures 98. So there was a great fear that when the year 2000 comes, the computer may go back to 1900 instead of 2000, and everything will go haywire. So therefore, the research began in Sirius, and this ultimately led to researches in other areas, as always research does. It spills over into many other areas. And one of the areas is the area in the national security concepts. National security is structured on 4 pillars. One pillar is objectives. What are your objectives of national security? The second pillar is your priorities. Amongst these objectives, what are your priorities? Which is first, which is second, and what is the breakdown of those objectives? The third pillar is strategy. What strategy would you adopt in order to secure your national security? And the final is the resource mobilization requirements. That's the fourth pillar. In these 4 pillars, I would like to present what the national security would be in this coming century, and what are the implications and what the preparations that will be done. My speech is not going to be any country specific, although after my 25 minutes or so, we can have questions and you can make it country specific. But my speech is worded in theoretical terms, in the sense that what would be the status of big countries and small countries. And the first point I want to make of the national security in this coming 80 years left is that there is no such thing as a big country or small country in the new domain or the new structure of national security. Why? Because remember that when the war started as a method of different countries, it was all in the beginning all on the ground. Soldiers with better and improved weapons, from bows and arrows, increasing to guns, etc. It was all how much land you could capture. Then after this century, the last century, the 19th century, that is 1800s were over, the 1900s began with the advent of air power. And so ground troops and air power. Now we are reached a stage where ground power, yes, I mean army, military, etc. And of course, yes, aeroplanes, so on. But there is a new element, and that is the cyber war. And the cyber warfare, there is no such thing as a large country or a small country. For the other 2 centuries, it did matter whether you are a large country with a large army or a small country with a small army. Whereas now, the concept of bigness of the army has ceased to have meaning in starting with this century. And I'll develop points on that. Now, I think what I would like to say is that what I'm saying essentially is Sri Lanka may be a small island compared to, say, big countries like China, Russia, United States, India. But in a cyber warfare, if you develop that expertise, you will be equal to all those countries. You can sit in a room and damage a whole country in some other faraway place. And we have begun to taste this. Recently, the Chinese, who are now, I think, heading for a war with India, because of the fact that they don't accept the land that they have taken from us, was by a treaty arrangement in 1993 within India and China as Indian territory till the final solution is reached. And they have just crossed the line of actual control, and they don't think so, but we think so. And that's why the war has to come. But they, in March this year, Suddenly the city of Bombay went completely dark. Nothing was, no electric point was working. And it lasted for 2 hours. And nobody had any clue how it happened. And then the Chinese put out an announcement. Don't push us too hard or the lights will go out again. And they explained that they had done it by cyber war or attack on India. So, I mean, there is this demonstration that sitting in a room in Beijing, they were able to paralyze Mumbai, as it's now called, for 2 hours. And so imagine as these develops grow and then artificial intelligence comes and then you have all these robots and already you see, what are those planes, drones. How much difference it has come. The manpower is required, is limited, but it must be highly qualified. So we now reach a situation where we have to no more think of warfare as mobilization of weapons and dependent on the size of the army, but it's cyber warfare means drones, artificial intelligence, cyber electronics, and small, big countries are all friends or threats. There can be no question of ignoring any country. North Korea is already beginning on that line. It's developing very fast its cyber warfare techniques. And I would say to a country like Sri Lanka, which has got a very highly educated population, I think your literacy is practically 100%. And we have your scientists, engineers all over the world. But if Sri Lanka today takes a determination that the next 15 years they will work hard to build Sri Lanka as a cyber war capable country, then you will be one of the world powers for reckoning. So this is the one thing about national security in the 21st century which I'd like to mention. Now, the problem with the cyber warfare is you just don't know where they are. Today, if a rocket comes, you know where it is coming from. You can track it by computers. And if a plane is coming, you know from where it's coming. When the soldiers are moving, you know in all these things in advance. But in the cyber warfare, you have just no idea where it is coming from till somebody announces and takes responsibility. So therefore, this overt and covert operations that you have seen, as in the case of electronic warfare of this kind, there is no front line, there is no ground capture, nothing. It is it's in the cyberspace, and on that basis, it functions. So, what's your objective? Your objective has to be that you yourself have to become a cyber warfare specialist country. That is, your objective should be to develop this technology and to use this technology for your defense. And in the process, over a period of time, I'm sure that we'll be able to detect from where the cyber warfare is being initiated. But that research is still to be done. But in today's context, all these aspects where manpower is just sitting at one place and pushing buttons, that is what is going to be the objective of preparing for your national security. And therefore, this has huge implications for your educational system. Educational system, mathematics should be compulsory for every subject, even for literature, in my opinion. So, if you're going to teach Shakespeare, specialize in Shakespeare or in English honors, well, but your subsidiary must be mathematics. That is the kind of life you will have to lead and adjust to. And in this respect, compulsory science subjects, analytical analysis, deduction, logic, deductive logic and inductive logic deduction. All these become an extremely important part of the objectives of national security. Now, I would say this should get priority. There are other things to be done. I'm not dismissing everything else. I'm saying if you have objectives, you have to have priorities. And the first priority is that you have to be a country which has cyber security. And cyber security, by the way, there is a new area on currency, which is, what is it called? Bitcoin. Bitcoin has made governments irrelevant. There was a time when we were primitive, where you could exchange a donkey for an elephant, depending on the needs. So there was no government in that. Then slowly the government came with gold. Ultimately, gold became a standard. Then it became gold standard. That means you use paper, but gold was not used as currency. It was, you just said, well, if you ever surrender your rupee or your currency, an equivalent amount of gold would be given to you. Today there is nothing but just paper. Currency is just paper. There is nothing except the legitimacy of a government. So now we are going back to where we were in the beginning, very beginning. There's no government in Bitcoin. And in cyber currency, there is just absolutely no way government can control you. Yet people have already started making billions on it. And the capacity for its misuse is enormous. Same thing with cyber technology. If the terrorists get hold of it, then who has the protection then? And where is the question of targeting terrorists? You won't even know where they are shooting from. So, in my opinion, it looks to be very dangerous. But the fact is that the education that you get should now be more and more oriented towards learning about cyber warfare. So if you have like your institutes that you have today, here there's these well-endowed institute you have, that should prepare people for cyber warfare. Now, people in India have asked me after my lectures, what should be India doing? Now, we have two major theaters of war on the ground. One is that which Pakistan and Talibanized Afghanistan are a potential threat. And the other side, we have China, which is now in parts of Ladakh, and also it has made movements in the most northeastern part, the Arunachal. And in this context, if the Chinese bring in cyber warfare, not now, they haven't gone that far, except perhaps they did demonstrate that they have gone far enough by what happened in Bombay. But this capability factor, that is what? What is deterrence? Deterrence will be the capability factor to identify the places where cyber warfare preparations are going on and be able to target them from your country. Now, that's not sending a missile there, because that cyber warfare, cyber setups would be able to discover it. So what we have to therefore do is, first of all, give up this concept of big nations, weak, strong nations, global powers, non-global powers, and so on. And unless we recognize that these wars may be bilateral, but multilateral war with cyber warfare will mean the end of the earth. There's no way the earth can be saved. World War I and World War II we survived, but World War III is completely the last war that we would be fighting. So that war should never take place. That is the national security thing that you have to do. So I have broadly told you about the objective and the priorities. Now, after that, I'm telling you the strategy should be that maximum number of countries should get together and pool resources and develop each other's cyber warfare capability or cyber warfare intelligence capability, and be also cyber warfare educated, so that it's, the Prime Minister is not one who knows nothing about cyber warfare. He must be able to understand its technicalities. So even in terms of people who go to get elected, I'm not talking about today, tomorrow, so today's politicians need not get nervous about what I'm saying. But I'm saying that maybe 2050 onwards. So in this thing, the strategies, priorities, objectives I have explained. But now I want to tell you what kind of resources would be recognized or would be required. How do you get these resources? I find this discussion on resources a little painful as an economist, because yes, if you're a chartered accountant, you got to keep your accounts. If you're a banker, yes, you have to make sure your checks and balances and costs and benefits. But as an economist, I have never been able to understand the word resources, and explain to you why. Supposing, as today, the Prime Minister of India doesn't agree with me, and so there's a little quarrel that is going on between me and in public and he as a Prime Minister, about what we should do about this collapsing economy in this COVID pandemic situation. Indian economy actually has been declining even before the corona virus hit India and other countries. In fact, it has been declining since 2015, continuous. If you look at the GDP growth rate curve of India, it has been down, 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 and before the corona pandemic came, the last quarter, that is 1st January to 31st March, was the lowest growth rate on an annual basis for that quarter since 1950. So it is that bad it happened. Now what this happened, why it happened was that the Prime Minister's office, which is a dominant office today, more than even all the ministries, that did not recognize the fact that there is something called demand and there's something called supply. India from these last few years was a supply excess country. If you went to an automobile shop, you will find cars standing in large parks because they are not selling. And you will find over excess capacity across the board in all the industries. But what is the reason for it? The reason for it is the demand weakness. And demand weakness has come about by a variety of things. For example, the fact that interest rates were raised, and because interest rates were raised, therefore the small and medium industries went bankrupt because they found the loans difficult to get, or at least the cost to cover. And the people also felt those who had taken loans from banks for marriages, in a very difficult situation. Similarly, by raising interest rates, you are actually making it difficult for corporations even to function because of the fact that the loans had become very difficult and so on. So it is across the board. So policies make the difference. So I'm saying that if your country makes the right economic policy, resource is not going to be a problem. If in India today, India just printed currency, because there is nothing to stop you from printing currency. Print this currency and put it as a handout to the workers, to the middle class, the lower middle class, and so on. Like Trump did in the initial stages of the corona, he ensured that the Department of Treasury sent checks to the accounts of all the people who had become unemployed during the corona period, and thereby kept the demand up. And that just by printing notes. And nothing has happened to the United States because the budget deficit was more than 4. You get these jargons from the IMF, which I think only people who are terrified by these institutions would follow them. It made no sense. So I'm saying that in these programs, why I'm bringing in is that resource mobilization is a stumbling factor in developing these technologies. And I'm saying for this technology, printing notes to the extent required is something that will be beneficial to the country and will not lead to, I think, especially if it means more workers, more employment, more people now willing to come and work for you instead of trying to join a private company. All these methods will make that difference. So therefore, I'm saying to you the last thing which is often used in common discourse, where's the budget? Budget is there in the printing press. And therefore, for this particular project, which is the lifeline of the future, and that is cyber warfare, and the associated things like drones and artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence still has not been completely, it's not yet developed to the point where you will have robots who will be like human beings. I mean, that will going to make a huge difference. We haven't studied it. I saw NASA, National Aerospace and Space Agency of the United States, bring out a report on artificial intelligence in their journal called Journal of Artificial Intelligence, where they say the most scientific way to develop artificial intelligence is to store data in Sanskrit. And I just couldn't believe that was true, but the most mathematically friendly language in the world is Sanskrit. And so I think we in the subcontinent should be able to learn artificial intelligence much faster than anything else. You can go to Google and you will find that in the Google, this is available, artificial intelligence in Sanskrit, and then the reference to NASA will come. So I am saying that these are topics which are mind-boggling topics, which will be part of your national security. And so the national security in the 21st century is not so much about armies moving, aeroplanes flying, but the use of cyber warfare against each other, which can be deadly. And in this, there is no such thing as a large country and a small country. All countries are superpowers or nothing, according to their preparation to meet the challenge of cyber warfare. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. You may now take your seat at the head table. And I also invite General Kamal Gunaratne and Professor Rohan Gunaratne to take your seats. Today's session is moderated by Professor Rohan Gunaratne, the Director General of Institute of National Security Studies. Sir, it is my honor to introduce you. Professor Rohan Gunaratne is an honorary professor at General Sir John Kotalawala Defence University. He is a senior advisor to its Faculty of Defence and Strategic Studies, a former senior fellow at the United States Military Academy at West Point. He received his PhD from St. Andrews University, where he was a British Chevening Scholar. A specialist in national security, he received the General Van Diemen Award for Intelligence Cooperation. Dear sir, the microphone is over to you now. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, to spark the discussion, the Q&A session, I would like to say that Dr. Swami moved between the past and the future. So if we look at the oldest age we had was the Stone Age. From the Stone Age we went to the agriculture age, and then to the industrial age, and to the information age. You're talking of the digital age, and that will dawn in 2030, that is in 9 years' time. So what I would like to say is that he has spoken very much about the future, but I would like you to engage him both on his trajectory of the future, but also of the past and the present. And in order to do so, I want to share something with you that we learnt a few minutes ago. As the Secretary of Defence, General Gunaratne, said, Dr. Swami steadfastly supported Sri Lanka when we had very few friends. In fact, I would place him in the trajectory of history with Richard Armitage from the United States, who supported us, and then Lord Naseby from the United Kingdom that supported us. You supported us from India. So in history, you have a special place, and that is why you are our honored guest today. And the Secretary of Defense will correct me if I'm wrong. Since we moved to our new headquarters, you are the first international dignitary to make a formal presentation. Am I right, Mr. Secretary? So I want to tell you that we are people of deep history and gratitude. So we pay tribute to you for helping us at a moment when we had few friends beyond our shores. With that quick introduction, I also want to share with you that he helped us at a time when he faced many threats. Today we learnt that Prabhakaran had placed Rajiv Gandhi on his death list, but Prabhakaran also placed Dr. Swami on his death list. In fact, of the LTT key supporters in India, there was V. Gopalasamy, there was Nedumaran, and there was Seaman. And Gopalasamy himself told you about the threat. So to spark this discussion, I would like you very quickly to mention within a minute about what Gopalasamy told you.
It's in retrospect very funny. The minister in 1991, when I had been given a task by the then Prime Minister, Mr. Chandrasekhar, to make an assessment of what's really going on in Tamil Nadu. Because we had received intelligence report that Mr. Karunanidhi was planning for a secession announcement. And the LTT, which he had fully supported, judged by the fact that most of the petrol pumps which were sanctioned by the ministry during the time DMK was part of the central government, which we brought down, which is headed by VP Singh, and which is also the government which legitimized LTT to a great extent. There, Mr. Karunanidhi's people were part of the cabinet of that government. And we also got intelligence to say that Mr. Karunanidhi had been briefing a man called Baby Subramaniam. I don't know whether you know him by name here. And anything the center sent to him by way of information, he would then pass it on. Not only petrol pumps were being given freely to the LTT to take diesel and oil, petrol and all for the war effort against the IPKF. Also our hospitals were in Tamil Nadu opened to the injured of LTT to be treated in that. So he asked me to give him a report. I gave him a report after going there that there's no alternative except to dismiss the government under Article 356 of the Constitution. And for that we needed a report which was signed by the governor. Mr. Barnala was at that time. So this task was given to me. I took it to Barnala to get his signature. Mr. Barnala was called to Delhi, and there I met him in the Tamil Nadu house and in Delhi, and asked him to sign it because I said I have verified it. There's nothing much to think. This is a dangerous time. We have to. This is what Article 352 was set up for, put into the Constitution. But he declined. He said, I can't do that because Mr. Karunanidhi appointed me as the governor. And I'm loyal to him. That's a very strange thing to say, but that's what he said. Now that put us in difficulty for those who didn't know the law. So when Mr. Prime Minister came to know Chandrasekhar, he told me, what is this? He has not resigned, now we can't do it. So I said, no. The Constitution says that on a report signed by the governor or otherwise, a word which never had been noticed by anybody except me because it was put in the Constitution and nobody reads every word. So otherwise means without even the governor's signature. So I took it to Mr. Venkatraman, who was then the President of India. First he resisted signing, but then ultimately I persuaded him and he signed it. And we dismissed the government. Now, before dismissing the government, the Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs had met, which is, well, the Prime Minister, myself, and the Deputy Prime Minister, plus all the Army chiefs and IB chiefs and Intelligence Bureau chiefs, etc. And they all said unanimously that if you dismiss the government now, there will be rivers of blood, and there will be immediately a declaration of independence, and foreign powers will step in to support it. So I'm telling you all this because it's in this background that Mr. Prabhakaran paid a heavy price. So what happened then was that the Prime Minister left it totally to me. And Rajiv Gandhi was also supporting us, so Rajiv Gandhi said, I have full faith, give it to him. And so I went and parked myself in Madras. And of course, I called the DG police, etc. We took some steps which meant that after the dismissal of the government, leave alone rivers of blood, leave alone buses burning, even cycles were not burnt. And people came out in jubilation celebrating the dismissal. And subsequently we held elections, and out of 234 seats, only 2 seats were won by DMK. That bad it was. So that is what led to what he is referring to about Vaiko. So Vaiko was a member of parliament at that time, and I had just finished presenting a bill. I was also law minister besides being commerce minister, so there was a bill I had to pass. I came out in the lobby. He stopped me and he said, I have a message from somebody called Thambi. So I didn't know that was the usual name for Prabhakaran. Did you know that? Oh, yes. Okay. So he said, Thambi. I said, who's Thambi? So he told me Prabhakaran. I said, oh, him? He said, yes, he has a message that you are on his hit list and you will be killed like there was some defense minister of yours who was killed in some automobile accident or something. Vijay Ratne, Ranjan. He says, like him, you will also die. So I laughed. So he asked me, why are you laughing? So I said, you see, if Prabhakaran has got me on his hit list, what makes me laugh is that I also have a hit list and he's number one in my hit list. So, therefore, let's see who goes first. And thanks to you people, he went first. I mean, you people mean him and so this was a lesson. And then after that, there's hardly any LTT except underground, some poster or something. But there's no LTT in Tamil Nadu. Of course, there was a diabolical assassination on this, which I have shared with you something. But that's unless I'm in command of the government or I'm in an important position in the government, I won't be able to prove it, so I won't say it. Maybe at dinner you can ask me, I'll tell you. But Prabhakaran's assassination of Rajiv Gandhi. I also can say that Chandra Hasan gave us a great tip on Rajiv Gandhi's assassination, in the sense after the assassination, we couldn't figure out who did it because they had worked out the propaganda so beautifully. She was dressed in salwar kameez. So the Sikhs have killed him because of what happened in October 1984 and so on. And ultimately, Chandra Hasan told me that Mr. Prabhakaran had addressed a public meeting in Jaffna on 10th of June after the assassination and given a medal to some Rajaratnam poet whom nobody had heard of. So nobody knew, and entire Intelligence Bureau of India, RAW, none of them knew who Rajaratnam was. So I asked Chandra Hasan, and he said, only thing I know about him is that he was a poet, but his daughter was the leader of the Tamil Tigresses. And then we got a photograph and identified it. So that extent to which it was planned, but unfortunately it didn't work, and then of course LTT was banned and the people have been put in jail.
Dr. Swami, you have been very well briefed by the Indian services because the killer of Rajiv Gandhi was a woman called Thenmuli Rajaratnam. Her LTT name is Danu. She trained in the 7th batch in India in Tindugal. As you know, the first batch was trained in Himachal Pradesh, in Chakrata. Second batch first batch was in Uttar Pradesh. Second batch in Himachal Pradesh. 8 other batches, including the 7th batch, the training was in Tamil Nadu. But we thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, questions for Dr. Swami? Yes.
Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. My question is, so in international politics, the bigger countries like regional powers and superpowers tend to consider their neighborhood as their strategic backyard, their area of sphere of influence. And this has created certain constraints on the smaller countries in dealing with other countries, especially when the countries are such a competitor of the big country which is close to us. So how do you relate this to India and Sri Lanka relations, and also from the point of national security of our two countries?
Well, I feel from my knowledge of history that the closest allies should be both democratic countries or both dictatorships. In the case of Russia and China, now it is widely accepted in the strategic world that Russia is a junior partner of China. And the reason is that China had given huge amount of loans to the Russians, and the Russians find China ideologically not very different, although they are not formally declared as a communist country, but Putin was a KGB agent, we all know that. So India and Sri Lanka, if we are pitted against some other country which wants to be friends with you, first of all, there should be no conflict. You can be friends with both. And you can be friends with not only 2, but you can be with 10. And since Sri Lanka doesn't threaten anybody, so therefore that problem should not be there. But as a democracy in India, I think we need to take the view that Sri Lanka is situated in a very strategic area. If tomorrow Sri Lanka, India, in Andaman Islands and Malacca Strait is controlled with the help of the Indonesians, then you are a mighty power yourselves, because of the fact that the Chinese commercial traffic to Europe comes all through, 90% comes through the Malacca Strait. And Malacca Strait is like an undeveloped Suez Canal. And you can develop it to a point where you can control who goes through, who doesn't go through. So I would therefore say that there are some issues which need to be worked out, and that is the cultural one of bureaucrats thinking that small countries can be pushed around. And I found this problem not only with Sri Lanka, but I found it with Nepal too. And I think that is something we will address in our country. And I think we have now a mounting problem with the Chinese. It's very near war, and there could be a war. The probability is much higher than a war in Taiwan, certainly, between China and Taiwan. So in that, a lot of new changes will come. But at the moment, I would say that Sri Lanka has got a raw deal from India since your new government came, and it is being sought to be corrected now. And I hope the correction takes it to its full limit.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the opportunity given, sir. And when you talk about the national security, the human security cannot be negated. So the human security is always on 4 things: immune system, then the prevention, then interdependency, and the people sector. So my questions revolves around the interdependence. So whenever the interdependency starts, the sovereignty of that particular country is questioned. So
Therefore, you can repeat that question just once more so that we can hear clearly. That's okay, we can hear you. Use the mic.
Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yes.
This is with related to now human security is part of national security. So the human security always runs on 4 things. That is universalism, then the prevention, the other thing is interdependency and people-centered. So my question revolves around interdependency. Because when the interdependency starts, the sovereignty of that particular country, whether it is a lower income country or middle income country, will be threatened. So with your vast experience and knowledge, what are the strategies that you recommend to overcome such fluid situations for those countries? Thank you, sir.
You know, in this last century, some countries have unraveled. The Soviet Union broke up into 16 countries. Yugoslavia broke into 4. And Pakistan broke into 2. A small part of Indonesia also broke away. But the much predicted balkanization of India did not take place. In fact, right from day one, Churchill predicted 3 years. 3 years passed after 1947. Nixon said it will be the decade of the 1970s. Well, decade of 1970s, Nixon was impeached, but not India. and India survived, he said it will break into 20 countries. And this prediction has gone on, but India has disproved all of them. What is the interdependency that is there in India is a common understanding of the historical origins of our country, and in which now we are bolstering it with the knowledge of DNA studies, the journals of biology and biometrics and so on. They all are saying that Indian DNA is the same whether it is in South India or North India, East India or West India, and except on the fringe on the border with China, where there's some mixture, but even there the dominant genes are that of Indians. There is no difference between the genetics or the DNA of a Brahmin, Kshatriyas, and all these are not birth-based anyway. Even in our scriptures, say like Gita, Bhagavad Gita, it's very clearly said that this Varna system is not birth-based. Krishna himself says so. Now you are asking what way you can bring this interdependency. See, these mythology which has been spread by imperialists in the past. In our country, it was all the British which spread all this rubbish about Aryans and Dravidians. There's no such thing. No one came from outside. We have no, and even the world scholars now are beginning to give up the idea of some migration that came to India who were Aryans, and that they drove the Dravidians, ruling Dravidians, down to the south. Dravid is in fact a Sanskrit word used by Adi Shankara for the first time, meaning Travid, which means where the three oceans meet. There's the Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal, and Indian Ocean. So the Aryan Dravidian theory has been demolished. That Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and all, they are of different different races, rubbish, not been disproved totally by the DNA studies, and it's not even by family. It is by choice of the job or the choice of the career that you choose. If you are a Jnani, Tyagi, and a Nirbhay, or that is, if you are knowledgeable, if you are sacrificer, if you sacrifice the worldly wealth, and you are courageous, then you qualify to be Brahmin. Who says that? Krishna himself says that in the Gita, in 3 different chapters of the Gita. But we think it's birth. A Brahmin born of a Brahmin is a Brahmin, no. Or a scheduled caste born of a scheduled caste is no. Valmiki was in fact born in a scheduled caste family who wrote the Ramayana, and he became a rishi. How is that? Because, and same thing with Veda Vyasa, who wrote the Mahabharata. He was born of a fisherwoman, and he rose to be a great rishi and wrote the Mahabharata. So I think the wrong notions that we have acquired, I'm talking in the context of India and Sri Lanka only. I can't say anything about Russia and all, I haven't studied those. But India and China and Sri Lanka suffer from the history that was written for us by the British authors. And that was a project which Macaulay said in the Parliament of Britain, England, in 1835, called the Minute on Education for India, where he said that our idea is to create differences and to bring, to degrade the culture of India and make them into brown Englishmen. I mean, English in habits, English in dress, English in eating, choice of, how you use with a fork or knife, or you use your hand. All this is described by Macaulay. So, purge all these history books and write what is correct. Don't by scholars, the politicians can't do this. Get scholars, eminent scholars, put them together and have where you write the correct history. I'm not saying do a propaganda at that, but write the correct history will remove these interdependency differences and will be much stronger. But let me again add, there's no defensive mechanism except post-attack by a cyber weapon. I mean, you can't prepare for a war unless you know what the war is. If a cyber attack takes place, we can make sure, for example, in Mumbai, the cyber attack took place, we never knew, because we now know because the Chinese themselves have admitted to doing it, and it's as a warning. So now we will ensure that we have alternative technologies to go into activation upon such an attack. So those things we can do. But you have to now be cyber technology savvy to survive as a nation. Otherwise, you will be at the mercy of those who are. And some countries have already got a lead, but fortunately, Sri Lankans and Tamil and the Indians, they have demonstrated all the world that software, electronics, all these things are natural for them. And if artificial intelligence needs Sanskrit, it means that we must have got it in our DNA itself. So I don't think that this 21st century security should worry you at all, because we are potentially able to develop a system which is superior to everybody else.
Yes.
So you were mentioning about
Doctor, you can introduce yourself.
okay. I'm Tesara Jayawardena from the University of Moratuwa, and I'm head of the Department of Industrial Management. Yes, as you mentioned, the 21st century national security is threatened by digital warfare as well as biological warfare. So one may say that the governments should employ people with more digital knowledge and more skills. But how do we escape the loopholes of this cyber system? I will go further with my question, like, because cyber world is really uncontrollable, and somebody might suggest that enforcing criminal justice to cyber crimes would be the way forward, or maybe you may, in your speeches, I have seen that creating awareness among people or building a digital awareness among the community is the correct way of moving forward. Since you mentioned prior that about democracy, I was thinking, somebody always says that autocracy is the proper way to, deal with cyber crimes, since democracy is not probably, facing the challenges. But then, China is not really undermining the democracy of other countries. In fact, they have offered to provide the cyber tools to control the safeties, if I may, but in India and Sri Lanka, we don't necessarily ban websites or arrest people. We try to find subtle ways of using our powers, even though our Defense Secretary has proposed some, strict measures to control these cyber crimes. We are still not doing that, even if we do. When you look at the recent example of Israel NSO, that, how India and Hungary has been sold some cyber security software to control the, suppress the voice of the opponents and the journalists. So, with all those in mind, do you think, cyber security and moving forward, should it be an autocracy way of doing it, or can we do it with a democratical way of handling?
Yeah. Very good question, and a tough one. I think cyber security is one which is no respecter of either democracy or dictatorships. They cause damage. And in my opinion, democracies are better because the dissemination of information to deal with a post-cyber attack is much easier, because in dictatorships, they may consider imparting such knowledge as dangerous to their autocracy. So I don't think that democracy is at a disadvantage. In fact, all research, and you're centrally in the field of research, is advanced when a lot of people discuss, contradict, criticize, write journal articles. So it's only in a democracy that you can do it. And therefore, I think I will say the opposite, that cyber warfare, we can have, of course, cyber warfare protocols, international protocols. You can do this, do that. If you are going to do a cyber attack, you have to give an advance warning. All that. You can have international relations. International codes for this, and anyone else the whole world will gang up against as as an outcast. So therefore, that you can, but still the mere fact that where it originates from, unless the country owns up to it like the Chinese, you will not know. You won't even know if the terrorists got hold of it. It's possible that a country develops it and then it falls to the terrorists. Like if Afghanistan had developed it and Taliban took it, Taliban would played havoc with it. So more important is, first of all, the knowledge what cyber warfare means, and reorient your educational system, because that takes itself 20 years to produce. A system where the people are become savvy, they are knowledgeable, and they are able to articulate, the atomic energy also, if you look at the newspapers of that time of the 1940s, we're shocked at how people thought that, the end of the world has come. And Japan thought the end of the world has come when Nagasaki and Hiroshima had been bombed. So, but then over a period of time, we developed rules, and then slowly it's no more such a monster as it was before. So this also should be subject to education, and education development is, in my opinion, the most important part today for the future.
Yes, General Robert.
Good evening, sir. I'm General Rayus Royal. I'm the Director General of Center for Defense Research and Development. I believe that you brought up one of the most important topics today, which I have been putting up in this country since 2013. Even when I went to follow the National Defense College course, the thesis that I wrote was role of Sri Lankan military in combating future cyber threats. Because having fought a war for 30 years, we have very well identified that the next wave of terrorism would hit Sri Lanka in the cyber domain. But with the Defense Secretary, we have worked out so many things for the defense as well as for the rest of the nation. But my question is, always there had been sort of dilemmas, civilian versus military, law enforcement agencies versus intelligence communities. So when it comes to the cyber security or cyber warfare, naturally somebody might think, oh, okay, that is the role of the military. Military should fight that as well. But military cannot fight a cyber war with rockets, weapons, or whatever it is. So in your opinion, what would be the role of the future militaries in combating cyber warfare? And how cyber security should be incorporated into the national security policy as well. And again, I feel when it comes to the laws which are prevailing at this moment, do not support this, whatever the crimes or whatever the things what would take place in the cyber domain. So what are your recommendations for that? Because there has to be so much of interrelationships amongst countries. Thank you.
I'm told your president was an army man before. So at least Sri Lanka couldn't have any complaint about lack of, lack of coordination between the army and the civilians. But ordinarily speaking, I think the civil society should be educated in the essentials of the army. That's why in India we created something called NCC, National Cadet Corps, where students went and lived in military camps, did rifle shooting and, marksmanship and climbing on ropes and so on, all these things. But in military itself has become now so much cyber dependent that I don't see any conflict in this unless there is a civil servant who is just thinks it's a waste of time. There are people like that in many occasions. We find that in our country. Because they think that basically law and order, that is all that is important. And managing the finances is important. So that kind of thing, but that's the more the exception than the rule. As far as I can see, the way things are going, the way the knowledge is spreading, people are reading, young children are looking at computers and they are able to understand. They tell me much more about science than I knew at their age. And so I see no difficulty in making the transition to the new cyber age. And Sri Lanka has now an advantage. It's no more a handicap to be a small island relative to, say, the big countries. Because cyber warfare, we are all equal. And therefore you have a new program to give maximum focus to cyber studies. I'm sure that some committee can be set up and you can do it. And Sri Lanka would be in the forefront with the others, since we are already on software and in these matters pretty far ahead.
Let's go for the last question.
Commodore Damien Fernando from Sri Lanka Navy. I'm the Commandant of Naval and Maritime Academy. So thank you very much for your insightful thoughts. So when it comes to the national security, so of course, it determines the national power. When in the 21st century, in a contemporary world, it's determined by 4 factors. One is your diplomacy power and the information, of course, the cyber you have talked to a greater extent, and the military might, of course, it will stand on. Then the last one is economic. So we have seen that since the Indian Ocean has been contested platform in 21st century, so there are few words in the global arena. One thing is debt trap diplomacy, the crisis. Since being a small state, with your colossal experience, how do you propose us to tackle this lawful approaches, which finally determine your national policies? So please comment, sir.
An interesting question of yours, but let me say first of all, for long years, economists thought that capital and labor, and land, of course, but land is a limited commodity, so it soon went out of the equation. But labor and capital, these are the 2 factors of production. And everybody, you see newspapers even today talking about, so much money has been allocated, so much and so on. But as economists, I can tell you, as far back as 1957, we economists had come to the conclusion that whether it's the United States or whether it's Japan or whether it's the European developed countries, all developed due to the fact that 60% is attributable to new innovations introduced in the economy. Today, for example, you can desalinate water, so the rivers going dry has no meaning, strictly speaking. I don't say that you should deliberately make the rivers go dry, but because rivers have become a part of our civilization. However, many of the things, there was an economist called Reverend Malthus, who said that the rate at which population is growing and the rate at which food is growing the rate of food is much lower than the rate of growth of population, and soon we will be eating each other up. This was his prediction in a book, and he was a reverend. What happened? The rate of population for every country in the beginning of development rises, and then reaches a peak and then starts going down. Today, what is the problem in Greece and what is the problem in most of Europe? They have a very small birth rate. And therefore, they have to get these migrants from abroad, and then they are having social problems like in France. So, as prosperity increases, it's an economic law that people have less and less children. And China tried to accelerate that to take it to the other extreme. Now they're regretting it. But as a consequence, what is happening? That every developed country is becoming an aging population country. Take Japan, where the average number of people who are above the age of 50, 25, the average age of Japan is 50 years. On the average, the Japanese are 50 years. India is only 25. Because the number of children produced by Japanese is 1 and 2 like that, whereas the Indians produce 3, 4 easily. So therefore, let us understand that even economy, it's the innovations which drive the economy, and that is what Sri Lanka is eminently capable of. And in an environment where it doesn't matter if you are big or small. With a small number of cyber weapons, you can devastate the whole of China or the whole of the United States. So, therefore, what, if at all, if China wants, if Sri Lanka wants to work with any country, it must work with a country which they are able to interact in the same way that they interact amongst themselves. So, democratic countries are the obvious choices for getting together. You may have relations with other countries, but in terms of closeness, it has to be, or collaboration, it has to be people who think alike or have a similar history, similar background, and overcome all the divisions that have been artificially created. As I gave you the example of caste in India, it's a total north-south, totally rubbish. There's no such thing as a Dravidian race. Dravid is a geographical term. This is what I meant to say.
Thank you, Dr. Swami. My colleague Charani will now bring us to the final item on the agenda.
Thank you very much, sir. First and foremost, I have to thank our guest speaker for delivering an eclectic presentation, and also for the audience for raising important contemporary questions and entertaining us. That was truly thought-provoking. Ladies and gentlemen, now it is the time to deliver the mementos. Director General of INSS, Professor Rohan Gunaratne, will be now presenting a memento on behalf of the Institute of National Security Studies to Honorable Dr. Subramaniam Swamy for honoring the invitation and delivering an eclectic presentation. Okay, perfect. And now it is the moment of presenting another token of appreciation by the event chair, General Kamal Gunaratne, WWV, RWP, RSP, USP, NDC, PSC, MPhil. To our Honorable Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, on behalf of the Ministry of Defense and State Ministry of National Security and Disaster Management and the Tri-Forces. Dear sir, you have another very special gift from our secretary, sir. You will be awarded with his precious book, Road to Nandikadal, and also the book of Gotabaya, as a token of appreciation for visiting the premises. To end these proceedings in the evening and to deliver the vote of thanks, I now invite Director General of INSS, Professor Rohan Gunaratne.
Dr. Swamy, you addressed a galaxy of defense, military, law enforcement, and intelligence officers. Many of them fought in the battlefield. They sacrificed a large part of their lives serving in the north and the east. They left their families behind. Most of the time, they were not with their children, with their most loved ones. And of course, the Secretary of Defense, General Kamal Gunaratne, who is seated next to you, my favorite general, he also sacrificed many years serving to unite our country. But you, from our neighboring India, supported us steadfastly amidst live threats to your life. So at this moment, at this milestone event, we like to express our deep gratitude and appreciation. You will be our friend forever. You will be recorded in the annals of Sri Lankan history. So please accept our respects from all of us. Let me also ask you to take a message to India. India is our friend, but we have suffered a lot from 83 to 87. As I mentioned, India armed, trained, financed, and directed 5 terrorist groups. But today, the geopolitical situation has changed. At that time, we had drifted away from the non-aligned orbit, and we were very close to the Americans. Your country was under the Soviet sphere of influence. You were a command economy. We were a market economy. Today, India and Sri Lanka has no issue, no problem, because we are both market economies. But my country and the country of everyone here, except you and your guest, is under tremendous geopolitical pressures because Sri Lanka is the gateway to the Indian Ocean. As you mentioned, the traffic separation line is not far away from where you are. So I believe that it is very important for us to get our foreign policy part right. That is why the president of this country said that our foreign policy posture is one of neutrality. We will work with India, with Europe, with the United States, with Japan, with Australia, and with China to build our nation, because we suffered a war of 30 years. We have to strengthen our economy. We have to move from the third world to the first world. So I want to assure you in front of these war fighters that we mean no harm to your nation. We love your country. There is no genetical difference between you and me. Our DNA is the same as your DNA. So I want you to take a message to your nation that we would like to live in peace. If you look at our history, our country has suffered from 21 invasions. 17 invasions came from India, from the Cheras, the Choras, and the Pandyas. We had 3 invasions from the Dutch, the Portuguese, and the British. We had 1 from the Chinese. Cheng Ho came in the 14th century and took Veera Alakeswara, Alagiya Kona, to China. Fortunately, the king became blind during the voyage. Otherwise, the Chinese punishment to him for not honoring the Chinese law would have been that he be beheaded. Today, his great-grandchildren live in China. So I want to share with you that we have moved away from that period of history. And today is the moment for us to work together as we face common threats. As you rightly articulated, we are challenged with common problems of crime, of terrorism, of extremism, of maritime challenges, of fissile and missile proliferation. So I believe that you have looked into the future. You are a scholar who spoke in the Harvard style as a practitioner of statecraft. So I think that you understand that our interests are coming together and there is no longer a necessity for us to be adversaries. So we ask you to take these beautiful memories of your visit from Sri Lanka, from the President, from the Prime Minister, from our Secretary of Defense, and from all of us. We thank you very much. And let me also thank our Secretary of Defense. He gave us this beautiful auditorium. Also, Mr. Secretary, your MLO and your MA, Colonel Jayavira and Brigadier Nanayakara worked very closely with Admiral Dimuthu Gunawardena, who introduced you, and also Madam Nilmini, who is our Director for Administration. We thank you, Secretary of Defense, and we thank all of you for coming and participating here. And I think that we should all give a higher priority to digital security and towards building those cyber capabilities, as you have recommended. And when you come next time, we'll give you a briefing on the progress we have made. Thank you very much. May you travel safe. May you travel well to India and take our wishes from our heart to your great nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. While thanking you again for your presence and once again, and we believe you would join us in our future events, I now invite the guest speaker and the other VIPs to proceed to the breakout room, which is on your right side, and other distinguished invitees to proceed outside the hall from both the exits to entertain the refreshments. Thank you very much once again.